Welcome to the Channeling Spirit Virtual Summit, a platform where we have invited Spirit to share messages, healings, and transmissions with all of us. May this energetic experience help us to expand our awareness and to deepen the relationship we have with our higher self, our spiritual team, and with Source, however we define them. Thank you for being here and for taking part in this amazing journey. Welcome to the Channeling Spirit Virtual Summit. This is Daniel Martinez Stahl, episode 5, season 3 with Joe Monkman. So welcome and appreciate you guys being here with us. Very excited to see how this call is going to go, this conversation is going to go, because Joe and I haven't really played together very much.
No, we haven't. This is good.
We met each other recently through a mutual friend with one of the other speakers that introduced me to Joe. We had a good conversation, and so I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes and how we play together, and you guys are going to kind of come along for the ride.
Yeah.
So as always, those of you that are live with us, feel free to interact with us, put things in the chat, raise your hand. We'll bring you in as we can, but please interact with us as much as you want. So I'll let Joe introduce himself to you, and then we will go from there.
Okay, so I'm Joe Monkman, and at the moment for the last 3 years and many years before that, I'm in New York City, and I'm back here in part because of COVID. It kind of left me here when it roared in. So here I've been, and let's see, I want a little bit of my background, my bio?
Up to you, whatever you want to share about yourself.
You know, I was thinking, Daniel, that I'm glad you had me update my bio, because I'm so used to just trying to condense everything. And when I ask people, when I organize these kind of things of my own, I'm trying to, sometimes I get 2-page bios and I have to whittle it down so it fits on like a flyer or something, But I was thinking a lot about what I sent you, because I have sent that out in similar form before, but it was, this time 30 years ago, I was in a rage for the most part. My anger was starting to just like creep out, seep out, explode out of my body, out of my being. And then in 93, under a full moon, I was meditating, and my body started shaking. I started hearing a very clear voice. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move except for, my body had all but my sacrum I had been lying down, and my body was lifting itself off the ground. Only my sacrum was on the ground that I remember. And I was intermittently scared, and I was curious and fascinated, and then I'd be scared because I felt like I had no control over what my body was doing. I couldn't open my eyes, I couldn't speak, etc. And then that's when I started hearing this voice come through that was familiar, but very foreign at the same time. And my hearing was very heightened. And so that I often look at that night as something that really shook me, literally, and woke me up and said, there's no going back. You've opened the door for the last few years through your meditations, through everything, and all of the stuff that I remember from childhood experiences started to come back, stuff that I had ignored, suppressed, whatever, because I think that's what we do, after a certain age in childhood. I think we lose a lot of our psychic ability. We lose, our seeing becomes conditioned in a certain way where we don't tap into that. We think it's just your imagination, or people around us tell us that, right? And I didn't grow up in a community where those kind of gifts and talents were encouraged, right? How many of us did? I don't know. But in Western culture, no, that's not the way it is. So So that began a whole intense journey through the 1990s of delving into shamanism, which was a foreign thing to me at the time. I didn't know anything about it, but it's something that came to me through a couple of teachers. I started going to Peru and meeting shamans, healers there, leading groups to Peru. So a whole world opened up to me that, you know, when I was a kid, I used to read stuff about Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, right? Because my mother had books, so I would sit on her bedroom floor and read them. I read the Bible, but really I just read Genesis and Revelations, right? The beginning and the end. So, so that I was endlessly fascinated by that at age 9, 10. And then that all kind of went away until my mid to late 20s. So, yeah. So that's what's going on, or what's been going on. But I'm very curious to these times. The last few years have been so also very revelatory, as people had been locked down, isolated. You know, a lot of opportunities opened up for people to deal with what's some inner stuff, some shadow stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. One question that I have for you, given your background, I'm also going to ask you by chance if you happen to have a headset, because there's a little bit of an echo when I speak that I can hear through your.
Oh, I don't.
Computer.
I don't. No.
Okay. So for those of you listening to the recording, sorry for the echo. Can you lower the volume of the speaker a little bit to see?
I am just now. I am.
Yep. Okay. Beautiful. So interestingly enough, in the last session, we had somebody that brought up a question about her anger, and you mentioned that you had a lot of anger at a part of your age. And I know that everybody's journey is different in terms of how they find their inner peace and transcend their anger, go to the other side of anger, become friends with their anger, whatever the process might be. But I'm curious about your own story. How did you shift away from, you know, living with a lot of anger as part of your normal day-to-day experience to seeing you today, where I would never think that you are living with anger as a process that
I didn't think at that time that I was either, and I would imagine that people at that time wouldn't have seen me as an angry person. I've always had an underlying calm and joy, but there was stuff that I hadn't dealt with. And that's what started bubbling up to the surface. Years of suppressed anger, trying to be the good guy, the peacekeeper, etc. I was hiding my sexuality, all these kind of things. It just all started to bubble up. I had to deal with anger that I hadn't dealt with about my parents or religion or society at large, disappointments, expectations, abuse, all sorts of things that I did a very good job of just pushing it away, but it all started to reach a head by 1990 through 1992, and there was no way I could ignore it. It was manifesting like I would start to get angry, and my lip would just I would just do this thing, and I was in my eye, and I was like, what is going on with me? But for me, the way I got into my path for me was that I found a teacher, a support, a guide who helped me feel all the anger, because what was under there was absolute fear. That was it. At the core of it, it was fear. Fear of who I was, fear of what I would become, fear of what I wouldn't become, fear of the world, literary themes like man versus nature, man versus, other men, man versus himself. These things that terrified me. Nature scared me on some level. Other people, particularly straight men, scared me on some level. I didn't feel confident. And I often walked around and sat around and spoke with my head down. So I would speak down into my chest, and that my whole posture began to change when I dealt with my emotions. And that was 4 very intense years. Not that there wasn't more work to be done, and still is around, this year it's been around resentments. So the anger that I had just had caused a lot of even physical issues with my digestion, because I had pushed all that fire down. It's got to go somewhere. It just kept stirring around inside, disrupting my emotions. So the way I was digesting life was very affected by not dealing with life.
Yeah. Appreciate you sharing that. And so the topic that you kind of raised in terms of the conversation is around being awake and appreciation, if I remember correctly. I don't have it in
Awake,
front of me.
aware, appreciative.
Yeah. So awake, aware, appreciative. Talk to us about that. What is it about that so again, for those of you that are kind of joining in and listening to this for the first time, the invitation that I give to the speakers is connect with your team and ask them what they would like to talk about. And so I'm curious why this topic?
Yeah, and I did sit with that. And sometimes information comes through and then I think, wow, it could be better. It could be different. It's like questioning this guidance that I've lived by for decades. In a way, it felt very simple. But it's about a consciousness, awareness / consciousness / really joy, which is behind me here. And how you want to live, how you choose minute by minute, blink of an eye by blink of an eye, how you choose to be in your life. There's that awakeness and that awareness, which the more you're quote unquote awake, and I'm not talking about this wokeness that is, out there in, the dialogue of, the United States and elsewhere. It's about an inner awakeness. How awake are you to your own joys? How awake are you? Like, I was not fully awake to my anger, right? 30 whatever years ago. What I was aware of was that I was angry and had resentments and had fears, but I didn't want to know that. So I had to become awake to myself, which caused me to really fall more in love with myself, which I had a hard time accepting and loving myself, as many people do, because I don't think we're really taught how to love ourselves. I think we're more taught, at least from the media, how to judge ourselves and critique ourselves than to really love ourselves. And of course, this has changed a lot. I think Oprah Winfrey, for example, has done a lot to help bring that out. Like, hey, look at me. I'm just a human being. Watch me, on national television for however long she was on the air, 25 years, deal with this, right? And there's a lot of celebrities who have helped that. And there's a lot of self-help practitioners. And now with the advent of like TikTok or Instagram and other social media, it's always kind of a double-edged sword, but there's many, many, many more ways than there were from me 30 years ago to find out how you can fall in love with yourself and how awake you can be and how aware you can be of your thoughts. Every thought that comes along, you can go, oh, that's going to take me over here. And that's the habitual path that never has felt really good, but it's very seductive because that's what over here is the unknown, right? If you change that little thought and you go, let's try this way, that's the unknown. We can learn to appreciate this path that we've trod over and over again, and we've created a rut in the road from it, and sometimes we get stuck over there. Often we'll get stuck over there, but this, we can go this way and say thank you to that. And then every moment opens up as a moment to just be in the love and be in the appreciation. So there's all of that, it's awake, aware, appreciative, awake and aware can make you appreciative. That's what I keep getting over and over again. You're awake to yourself. If you're aware of your habitual thoughts and beliefs, then you can change things and you can fall in love with yourself and all of what was over here and begin something that seems very new for you and appreciate every step of this new path in a way that you couldn't because you didn't have the awakeness, consciousness over here.
There's an element of what you're saying that really resonates with me, of being aware of the role that thought plays in our experience.
Huge.
Right?
Huge.
And there's also a trap that people can fall into innocently, which is to monitor their thinking and to create all kinds of judgment about their thinking. Oh, I just had a bad thought and I shouldn't be thinking a bad thought. I should know better. And so you can drive yourself absolutely insane and put a tremendous amount of energy into monitoring your thinking. And the reason that I bring this up is because this is a trap that I've seen a lot of people fall into innocently. When they start to recognize the power that thought has in their experience, they start to think, oh, I need to monitor everything I say or everything I think. And the invitation that really resonated with me is recognizing that thought is fluid and transient by its design. It will not stick if you don't give it energy and attention. It'll just pass on its own. And our thought patterns are like a river. They're just going to constantly come and go. And so for me, what really helped me was when I came across a thought that wasn't resonating with me, that I didn't like, that I didn't want to focus my attention on, I would just not pay attention to it and it would pass on its own and a new thought would come. I wouldn't have to change it. I don't have to fight my thoughts. I don't have to fight my thinking, because the thought is a natural fluid process. And so I just wait for a better thought to come along. And sometimes that's right away. And sometimes it's a little bit later on. But so for me, the activity that I pay attention to is, okay, what am I thinking about? What is that pointing out within my experience of where I'm focusing my attention? Because if I'm having bad thoughts, it's usually because I'm focusing on some aspect of my experience that I'm unsatisfied with. And it invites me to recognize that I'm paying attention to a side of my experience that can lead me down a path that may not be helpful, so that I can open my eyes towards a different path. It just kind of gives me an opportunity to take a breath, settle down. Okay, let's look at this a little bit differently. And then in looking at it differently, I find a better thought that resonates more with me. And even if it's just a little bit better, it points me in a different direction. And then that shifts the perspective of my experience. So, I love what you're saying. And there is that trap that we can fall into innocently of spending a lot of time and effort monitoring every single thought, which is just exhausting, because I can tell you from first experience, I've lived that. And it is not a place that I want to go back to, or I would invite other people to play with, because it's exhausting to monitor every single thought you have.
But that's also part of the journey of experiencing yourself as a thinking person, right? Humans can't not think. There's always going to be a thought. But again, like you're saying, it's like, what is the thought and how does it make you feel? Do you feel it pulling you down, or do you feel it lifting you up? And which do you prefer? So once you become aware of the thoughts, then yes, you can say, okay, let's wait for the next best feeling thought, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and they can build up into a longer stream until, what we might say is negative, that stream gets shorter and shorter, right? It doesn't mean that the positive stream will just go on forever. It's always there, but you might not be awake and aware to it all the time, right? So, I, for years and years, followed the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, and Pema Chodron, the Buddhist nun. And, that Buddhist mindfulness practice of just knowing that everything is temporary, even the thoughts that you think are happy thoughts. That changed so much for me. That seemed so outrageous to me, in the 90s. Like, well, wait a minute, what's all this? You got to think positive. You got to think positive. Well, you're not always going to think a positive thought, which is also why I love the work of Byron Katie, because she gives you a whole format to examine that, right? So there's always opportunity to learn and grow from your own thoughts, and then to go, do I really believe that? Because I used to, when I was a kid, I loved the color orange. I thought that was it, and then that changed. I'm not hung up on from when I was 8 years old thinking that orange was everything, But was it true that I noticed when I thought about orange bicycles or orange VW Beetles that I would see a lot more of those? Yes, very true. So because that's where my focus was. And I didn't think about it in those terms then, like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about it. My focus is on that. So of course I'm seeing more. That's not the way I thought about it. It was fascinating to me, but it wasn't, something I was reading in books as, in my single digit years. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting kind of level of awareness when we start to look at kind of the internal process that creates the external process.
I think we must look, if we want to be free, we want to be happier, we must look at what's going on inside of us. We've got to ask ourselves why we are feeling certain feelings, even the happy ones sometimes. Or we have to ask ourselves, why does my knee hurt all the time? Or why does my back hurt? Why does my neck hurt right now? Why do I have this cough? And I'm saying this specifically because last weekend I spent a lot of time coughing. I was sick throughout the work week. And then the weekend I just collapsed last weekend and spent most of the weekend sleeping. But last Sunday, I woke up lying on my side, coughing. And I wasn't fully awake yet, but I heard this voice that said, "You're coughing up your resentments." I was like, wow, that is profound. And those are the kind of messages I've been getting for decades, right? So when I hear something like that in that clear voice, in that semi-awake state, semi-conscious state, that really woke me up. That's when I opened my eyes. And I got out of bed. I said, that's true. That's true. All that has been stuck down here. Whatever's left of it, because that's been one of my focuses this year, is looking at those resentments and why do I have them, and why is it coming up now, after all this work that I've done, so
there's a process that again really helps me in my own journey, is in recognizing and understanding that our emotions are a guidance system.
Mm-hmm.
Our experience of life is guided by our emotions. Our emotions will tell us when we are pointing in a direction that is aligned with who we are and our desires and our joys. And our emotions will tell us when we are experiencing something that is creating an aspect of resistance in our experience in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. Either you like it or you don't. If you don't like your feelings, then you're focusing on things that are pointing you away from your true self. And so that
my guides used to say very often was, do you want to be on the crazy train or the peace train? And that would stop me, right? That would really stop me. And then I would say to myself, okay, what am I thinking? What am I believing? Because we sometimes need to really stop our world. I was a huge fan of the work of Carlos Castaneda. When all of this stuff started coming out, I started reading all of his, many of his books, I think the first 7. And in those books, Don Juan, his teacher, says, you know, we're practicing stopping your world, you know. And to me, that now means pausing long enough to recognize what you're thinking and believing and what you're feeling, so you can course correct if it's not feeling good, right? And yes, I saw a comment there, you know, yes, you know, we say, oh, after all, I'm only human. Yes, right? I'm not going to, we're not going to pretend like we're some living avatar here, you know. I mean, I met some very clear people, you know, some of my teachers just would blow me away. My teacher, Rosa, was so, I could feel her, you know, her vibration. And she would, the first few years, she scared the living crap out of me, because I was so seen. I was so appreciative that I was seen the way I was. I wasn't used to that. And that level of love and compassion, like a ruthless compassion. Like she would just, there was no way I was going to get away with trying to hide something in front of her, you know? So I think we need sometimes not only ourselves to be accountable, but it's nice to have a team, whether they're from the visible or the invisible realm, to help hold us accountable, to tell us the truth, right?
Yeah. There's an element where becoming more aware of how things work and how the mind works and how thought creates our experience and how our awareness is involved in that whole process. Having that level of understanding is not about judging yourself for your thinking or your experience or what you are doing or not doing. It's about having more compassion for yourself. It's in looking at the fact that we are living a human experience, and our human is going to have its ups and downs. Our human is going to have fluctuating thoughts. It's part of the human experience to have this. And it's also part of being
Compassion will
human to
change
get
the
caught
world.
up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
Compassion will change the world. I think that's why, like on I love politics. You've heard me say this before. I love looking at the geopolitical landscape, because I think it's a big indicator of where our group consciousness is and where we are as individuals, you know. So for me, the last several years in the United States, it was like compassion or very much a lack of. And you know, what are we going to choose as a collective, right? What are we going to choose? Do we want to be compassionate, or do we want to get the knives out and, you know, or say, you're not welcome here, you're not welcome here, you're not welcome here because you're this color, or you believe this, or this, or this, or this? Or are we going to say everyone's welcome at the table, and we will open ourselves to a dialogue based on love, peace, compassion, a greater awareness of people's quote unquote differences, which, you know, if we really sit with it, it's all very similar. We're human beings, for gosh sakes, right? So yeah, I mean, come live in New York City or walk around New York City. You know, I'm so glad that I moved here 30 some years ago, you know, because it really helped crack me open. It really helped me have more compassion and have more understanding and be more accepting of differences, because I was not that way toward myself. So compassion, I'm all in on the compassion. Go talk more about compassion, go live more, or go live that compassion more. It's imperative. It's imperative that we open our hearts more.
Seeing the innocence in our experience, for me, is what helped me be more compassionate towards myself. That was really profound for me, is when I started to see how innocently I was getting caught up in things, not because I wanted to be a difficult person or an angry person or whatever, but because I was just getting caught up in the noise of my head, and there was a direction that I focused my attention on. And when I started seeing how innocently I did that,
Yeah.
I started noticing that, well, if that happens to me, well, that happens to you too. And if you're being a jerk, it's not because you mean to be a jerk. It's just that you're focusing your attention on thoughts that you're having that you're believing to be real, and you're responding to that thinking, not
Yes.
to me. And
Feeling or thought, emotion, action, right? And then it's just a cycle. And, we just go round and round on the same wheel. We're just here spinning around on this one. We don't even notice that there are other spheres of existence, circling all around us. We're so myopic. We just we can't see it. We can't see it because we've trained ourselves not to.
Yeah, and for me,
I love looking at children, babies, or kids up to a certain age, because they have, if you look at eyes, there's so much love in there. There's so much innocence, right? And you watch how they are with each other. I love that. I've never wanted to have my own kids, but I love observing kids because they don't care. Especially little babies, when you look in their eyes, you smile at them, they smile back. Usually, it's fascinating, right? And what if we were able to really tap into that part of ourselves that was that endless stream of curiosity and wonder? I think that would also open the floodgates of compassion a lot more as well.
Absolutely, I would agree. I would agree. So Sally is typing in compassion, love, and joy. Absolutely agree.
They're all in the same family.
I think that a lot of the conversations that we have around the whole kind of spiritual awakening side of things, for me, is not just about understanding who I am as a spiritual being, but it's also about who I am as a human being and the relationship between both. And I talk about this all the time. But for me, part of that compassion for myself comes from recognizing the innocence of my human and the beauty of my human experience, and to appreciate call it the challenges that my human falls into innocently, and maybe not so innocently if my higher self is guiding my human to fall into those challenges for whatever the reason, which is another conversation altogether. But it's really, for me, it was really helpful to recognize that innocence is really a big part of that compassion that I feel for myself and others, is really recognizing that innocence in my journey, the innocence in falling into a misunderstanding and forgetting that I'm paying attention to the misunderstanding and focusing on the misunderstanding, and then making decisions because of that misunderstanding and driving my life because of that misunderstanding. I don't mean to misinterpret things, but I did, and I do, and I will. And that's part of the joy of recognizing that we're living the illusion of life. In the earlier conversation with Margot, which I'm going to repeat after this, at the end of the conversation, somebody asked the question about illusion. What is illusion? Because they hear the term used all the time. And for me, part of the beauty of recognizing the illusion of our human experience is to recognize that our human experience isn't real, but to appreciate the reality of the human experience. And
we can't distance ourselves from the fact that we're human beings. I mean, one of my teachers would always say, well, be careful of, having a spiritual bypass, where you're just kind of intellectualizing everything. When I moved to California 11 years ago, and to Southern California, I felt like I was in a Woody Allen movie at times, because I'd like, oh my God, Joe, your aura is amazing. And, let's go to yoga. And, it was just like, I felt like I just wanted to grab ankles and pull people down to the earth, because after living so long in New York City, it was like, but I was living this other existence in Southern California for a long time. And I had to, it it actually helped soften me more, which, you know, edges I didn't know I had. I didn't know at that time that they existed, but, you know, that feminine energy of Southern California just washed so much away from me, and really appreciate that. So coming back to New York, where it's like, but getting back to your point of, you know, how we think and what we believe, and, you know, the path we enter on because of that, you know, I always see that, you know, we're destined to get from point A to point B, right? And one of the things I love about aging, and having done, you know, looked at my process for so long and had such incredible guidance from, you know, humans and the spirit realm, is that now I can see that I can get from point A to point B, but it does not have to be arduous. You know, I used to think it was hard work, it was struggle, it was this and that. And, you know, maybe there were points along the way for me, it had to be like that, you know, by design, you know, pre-incarnation, like, all right, well, you're going to have these experiences, well, you're going to forget that we agreed to this, but you're going to have them. I feel like now, you know, the more aware we become of our own process, that we don't have to have the turbulent, chaotic dramas that we would create, I think, at times, in order to help wake us up, right? Now we can be more like the snake, and we don't have to, you know, keep rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, and a tiny piece of our skin sheds here and another one there. The whole sheath can come off. Maybe there's a little residue with, like, the snakes around their eyes and whatnot, but for the most part, snakes shed their skin all at once because they rub it off. You know, they rub up against a rock or whatever, and it comes off. You know, human beings, we get very attached to the old skin and we don't want to let it go, right? And this causes a lot of drama and chaos and resentment and bitterness and anger and fear, and we fall off the peace train, and we happily jump on the crazy train because we think we're going to get more attention there or something. I don't know, but
yeah, there's something you said reminded me of something I came across, and I'm going to butcher it completely, but the idea that, you know, we're always going to experience challenges, but that doesn't mean we need to suffer through the challenges.
Correct. That's a big part of Buddhist philosophy, from what I understand. And also, you know, a lot of other mystics have said the same thing. We might experience pain, for example. You know, I've had some great pains in my physical body, but I could see when I was creating suffering around it versus when I was just being with the pain, aware of the pain, knowing that it was there, but it wasn't causing me suffering. Very fascinating experiences when you get there.
And for me, you know, the subject that you bring up about awareness is what's helped me to reduce my suffering as I became more aware of the process, what I call the system of life, how the mind works and the role that I play within that process. As I became more aware of that, it gave me the tools to respond differently to my challenges. And the more I saw the role that thought plays in creating my experience, you know, we talk about thought, and I mean, thought is a big part of the conversation, the three principles. It's a big part of the conversation of the law of attraction, which is repeated by almost every spiritual channel in some way, shape, or form. You know, there's a relationship there that, as I became more aware of that relationship, it made it easier for me to navigate my challenges without as much difficulty. And I say that very specifically with that language. It's still difficult. I'm not saying it's not, but it isn't as difficult as I would have made it 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And I'm still hopeful that as I continue to deepen my awareness, it will become even less difficult and it'll become even more fluid. And so
everyone I know who has had a certain wake-up call somewhere along their journey, you know, who has really stayed with it and, you know, has done that inner work and really explored their thoughts and beliefs and emotions, etc. You know, looked at their past, you know, done a lot of recapitulation, their life gets easier. Because there's less drama and chaos across the board, whether it's in your most intimate relationships, whether it's work relationships, whether it's, you know, a relationship with, you know, the person you meet behind the counter at the CVS, you know. We don't have to be combative, we can be compassionate. We don't have to be lustful, we can be loving. We don't have to be angry, we can be adoring, you know.
So again, I want to invite people that are listening, you know, feel free to steer us in a direction, ask questions, feel free to jump in. But Joe, kind of going back to kind of the subject of this forum, which is to talk about channeling and to understand the relationship that we have with our team via the channeling that we do every day, whether we label that or not.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because, you know, many people do channel, but they would never in a million years call it that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always talk about how we're all channeling every day. And so we'll get to that question, Sally. But I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on, so what does channeling mean to you? How does that work within, and you've already talked about examples where, you know, in that kind of half awake state, you hear messages that are coming from presumably your higher self or your team or a loved one, which are the trios that I always refer to.
I think that, you know, I'm just remembering a message that I got, and I had just had this conversation a week or so ago with someone about this message that I got walking down the street in the beginning of 2009 in New York City, thinking about a situation. And then I just felt like this giant feather came across my, my solar plexus, and I stopped on the street and I got this very clear message. And I was like, oh yes, that's what's going to happen. Yes, boom. I was so clear because, you know, and I'm sure many people get this when the clarity, you know, I would say that channeling is clarity. Because, you know, when you get that boom, when it comes, like I paid off a debt yesterday, and I was going to put a payment in to this thing, for this debt. And I heard, just pay the whole thing off right now. And I froze because the voice was so clear, right? It was a familiar voice. And I thought, well, is that the smartest thing to do? And I heard, well, yes, it is. You know, and I still paused and questioned, and I heard, just go ahead and do it. It's okay. And so I just paid that debt off. I was like, and it just, because I also heard, once you do that, that will create more space. You'll feel more free. And it was immediately, as soon as I went, yes, boom, paid off. It, you know, it freed up headspace for me. So, you know, little moments like that, forget about the times when I'm doing that on behalf of someone else. You know, the channeling came to me, through me, on my own behalf, for my own well-being, for my own guidance, before I even told anyone about it. For years, I just did automatic writing. You know, a couple of times, one of my teachers asked me if I thought that I could speak and do channeling that way, and I did, but it was very stilted, because you know, it took, maybe it was 20 years ago or so that I started. I went to a friend. I kept hearing, you know, this person will, you know, if you ask her to sit with you and you can speak start it that way. And that's how it started. Because I wasn't comfortable, you know, the first few years of my shamanic journey, I really didn't tell anyone what I was doing. The people who were going to these groups and workshops and whatever's with me, of course, knew, but I wasn't telling the outside world. It was my private experience, because I was doing the work for me. I was doing the healing work for me, you know. I was very much guided to do that. There were moments when I would have so much resistance to go to see my teacher for a weekend, because I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so mortifying. I'm going to have to reveal something about myself, probably multiple things that are just I'm going to be so horrified. I don't want to cry and scream in front of everyone again. I don't want to do that. But I would hear, you have to go. And I would get on the bus to Woodstock, sweating profusely, that horrible nervous sweat that just stinks. It just rips through the clothes and just smells. Because I was so scared, but I could not go, right? The force was so strong because I knew that I needed to take care of myself. Right? And so that was for several years. But it's always, we're doing it for ourselves, right? We're always doing it for ourselves. You know, my polarity therapy teacher would say, give a session, get a session. There's always something in there for us when I do the channeling. Sometimes I don't remember the message. I'm very awake when I give messages, you know, but sometimes I don't remember what came out. But once I go back in that space, like with my Tuesday group, I will pretty much forget what was said. I don't record them because I don't want people to, you know, I give personal messages in the group and I don't want it to be passed around to people who aren't part of the group. But once we're back in the space the next week, the clarity, once I open the space again, I can remember things that were said to individuals or to the group very clearly. I can see it all in my head. I can see the words. I can see the images. It's all there. But that also takes practice. You know, it's not like I, you know, went to a workshop yesterday and said, I'm a channel now, you know. But that does happen for some people, right? They do. It's kind of like, oh, you know, their whole world gets turned around and suddenly, boom, this massive amount of information comes out. But for me, that's not how it was. It was a very gradual experience, and my ego was involved a lot in the beginning, a lot. I wanted to be recognized, right? So, yeah, but channeling, you know, it's a deep, deep, deep listening experience. You know, so when I do my channeling work, I can see and feel blocks of information coming in, kind of like from above down, and I kind of wait for it to settle here so I can get it in English and see the images very clearly, and I check in, you know, give me the best words, you know, the most focused words, the words that will have the most direct impact for this person or the group, you know, and then that all disappears eventually. So, and because you just open the channel, it's like you turn on the television and stuff starts coming through the box, right? You turn the radio on, stuff starts coming through. You want to change the channel, boom. We don't have all that static, right? That we used to back in the day when we had the dial to turn, you know, we just click, 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 and it's Sirius XM, or it's this, there's a very clear channel, right? And that takes practice to become a very clear channel. And I know that it's all often evolving for me. I can see it over the last 2 years, specifically how it's changed. So.
And speaking of that, the question that's been asked in the chat is, what do you do? What kind of work do you do?
I have a group called Spirit Messages on Tuesdays, where it's all channeled. It's all channeled. You know, and that came, a lot of that, just the channeling piece, I didn't just do that. You know, when I would get into my work with the shamanic healing clients that I would see in person, that would definitely come through, but it would mostly come through my drumming or my hands. And then it started coming out in very direct words. But these days, I do work one-on-one, not as much as I used to. COVID changed a lot of that. And also I went through a period when I was living in Southern California where I didn't know what spirit wanted me to do. It all seemed like what I left behind in New York seemed like a dream. And it didn't seem like it made sense to do the work in that way. The groups that I was doing, the way that I was doing the groups, the way that I was working with one-on-one clients, and it shifted more into direct channeling. So, you know, I'm sitting here with this stone, and I have other fetishes that I use, mostly stones, crystals, that I will hold. It's kind of like an anchor for me to bring the energy in, and I just hold it. Sometimes I stick it between my legs, or I have it just resting nearby, and then I will touch it every now and then. But that's how I get my focus. Right? I can do it without it, but it feels more, it's very comforting to hold an object for me, right? I used to do it very much through the drumming. When I was doing much more of the outright shamanic work, my work has really changed to more outright channeling, where I will do whole sessions and I will give people a whole list of like 6 to 12 words, depending on if I'm giving them a 6-month or a 12-month reading. And then I flesh that out from there. So, but, you know, a lot of the channeling that comes through has often a lot to do with again, the geopolitical stuff, which I've been interested in since I was very, very young. I love current events, and I had since I was a little kid. I used to read the newspaper voraciously. So I don't know if I'm explaining this well. Who asked the questions?
Sally, is that
Sally?
kind of?
Does that make sense to you, Sally? Do you need more of an explanation? Am I talking around this subject? I don't know. No, I feel like I'm saying it okay.
Would this feel like a good time to invite your team to share a message, whatever they would like to share?
Yeah, sure. Sure. I just want to also say that, you know, I do have guides that I work with that came very much through in that experience in 1993, you know, and at the time they said, you know, we've been with you for a long time, you know, and then when I started speaking, they were the only one, oftentimes the only ones that would come through. But then it started to evolve in the last, when I moved to California, I had an experience because I lived in Encinitas, California, which is where Yogananda, I don't know if folks are familiar with Yogananda, but he wrote the book Autobiography of a Yogi, and he was really the one, he was responsible for bringing yoga to the West, basically. And he moved to the West Coast of the United States, to Los Angeles, and had a hermitage in Encinitas, California, which is in San Diego County. So one of the first times that I was sitting in the meditation gardens there, I thought someone had come up behind me and put their hands on my shoulders. So when I opened my eyes and turned, there was nobody there, but I heard, "It's me, my child. It's Yogananda." And so from that point on, he sometimes comes through to give messages. Gandhi, I mean, Whitney Houston has come through, David Bowie, Michelangelo, you know, so I can't say that I know who's going to come through. Sometimes lately in my groups, I don't even identify who's coming through anymore, because it feels like much more of like a conglomerate, a constellation, a collaborative of energies that just begin giving messages. I can't discern. It comes so fast, you know. Sometimes if I'm giving a one-on-one message, I may say, "Oh, this is your grandmother, this is your mother, this is, you know, so-and-so giving you a message," because it feels like, yes, I need to say who that energy is that's speaking. Okay? But yeah,
Perfect.
wherever you are.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what we're going to talk about in a moment, what the message is going to be mostly about. And then if it feels right that they want to identify or who they are, I'll give you that as well. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so Yogananda. So Yogananda, when he comes through, because of my relationship with him and because of the things that I have been through, his information is often about moving, because he moved on the urging of his guru from India to Los Angeles, California, to Hollywood. And it's not something that he wanted to do at all. He had a lot of resistance. And this is a good main point from Yogananda today. We often have resistance moving from point A to point B. But Yogananda's course, what he brought to the Western world, changed, it changed people's perception of people who had his skin tone or his long dark hair, the way he dressed, or the message, the yogic philosophy that he was bringing. And then when his guru was dying, he went back to India and he said, oh, okay, so I don't need to go back. I've done my work in California. I don't need to go back. And no, he was called. The message was very clear that he had to go back. There was no doubt, right? But sometimes we doubt our movements. We doubt the path that we're on. We're dealt, we often say that we are dealt a certain hand and it can't be changed, or that's just the way it is. But, we can also change the outcome by being very much in our conviction, which is a very strong word, but it's a very important word at this time in the Earth's development, evolution, because we have experienced ourselves as a collective being very wishy-washy or being strongly convicted in ways that don't allow compassion, forgiveness, inclusion in. And so now there's a giant wave of energy coming over us now, again, that is all about, as we were talking about, compassion, inclusion, love, peace, understanding. These are things that, songs have been filled with these kind of lyrics over and over and over again. And there's a reason for that, right? Because the human experience wants that. It doesn't want to be in conflict. So as we move from place to place, as we've been saying here in this conversation, let's get clearer about how we are walking, what our footsteps feel like on the planet. What does it feel like every step that you take, every breath you take, every thought that you have? What are you carrying with you as you're walking? That's it. What does it feel like as you're walking day by day, minute by minute? Some human beings love to carry the same suitcase year after year after year. Sometimes they start to drag it because it becomes so heavy with the thoughts and the clutter and the chaos of the past. And they get so used to dragging that heavy suitcase around that when they finally put it down, the lightness of being is so overwhelming, they will weep. Because they never realized in their human experience how light their being could actually be. And then they understand that is that God, that universal spirit. That's what it feels like. It feels light and unburdened and open and clear and soft and gentle and kind and endless. So I think that's all that Yogananda has to say. Let me just check in. So the other piece of this is he was very big on teaching meditation. He was a very big proponent of meditation. And some people still say that they can't meditate, they don't know how, it's uncomfortable, they can't focus, but so many things could be a meditation. Floating on your back in a body of water can be meditation. Walking in the woods can be meditation. Making love can be meditation. Stroking your cat can be meditation.
Washing dishes can be a meditation.
Washing dishes can be meditation. It's how single focused you become in that moment. And then you become that channel for peace, for calm, for clarity, for compassion, for kindness, for gentleness. So find a way to meditate, to listen, to tune in, to be that brings that sense of calm through your body, through your spirit. Thank you. That's it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yogananda, by the way, he's such a beautiful energy. And I didn't know much about him until I moved to Encinitas. So
thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a question that was sent to me privately for you to talk a little bit more about your trips to Peru, whether or not you're still doing them, and what
I'm
were
not
they?
still doing them. I do have a dream of going back on my own, just to soak up the country that I love so much and that has given me so much, and to be with friends there. I don't have any plans. I started going there. I went for the first time to Peru in 1996. And I went to the jungle. So I flew into Iquitos, which is north, and went into the Amazon jungle from there on a long boat ride on the Amazon. And I spent 2 weeks in there with a master shaman named Agustin Ribas, who's well into his 80s now. And I don't think he's seeing people anymore at his camp there. And I had met him 3 years prior. I met him in 1993. And I did an ayahuasca ceremony with him in 1993. And then I went back and spent 2 weeks in the jungle with him through my teacher, Lorna Roberts, in 1996, and worked with the ayahuasca, that power plant there with him, and had other really wonderful and terrifying experiences with him. And then I went back to Peru a couple of years later by myself, and traveled for about 2 weeks on my own through Cusco, that area. And I had when I was flying into Cusco and saw the Andes Mountains, I just wept on the plane because I felt like I was home. And then I did the Inca Trail in 1999 and again in 2004, and had really wonderful experiences over the years, just going there on scouting expeditions and seeing my friends there, and also leading groups there over the years. But it's been 8 years since I've been back, and those were very much designed, those were shamanic journeys. So we did lots of ceremonies. Sometimes we worked with Wachuma, which is, oh my gosh, I forget what it's commonly called. That's the Quechua name. San Pedro, sorry. That's a cactus. But the land there is so, the mountains are so powerful. It's such a feminine energy there. If you want to go and experience feminine energy, please go there or go to Southern California or someplace close by. But those were very transformative trips for everyone that went there with me and me. I had a near-death experience there in the Andes in 2004. Here I am leading a trip and I'm having a near-death experience, on the ground on the Inca Trail, So those were those kind of trips, and I wonder now. I'm very different, and the team that I worked with there is very different now as well, and as because they've evolved in their consciousness. I just wonder what it would be like actually to take a group now. What would it be like for me as someone who did so much work there, has such wonderful, wonderful memories?
Yeah. Well, at least one person in this group would join you if you decided to create that again.
Yes. It's, let me just tell you, if you ever have the chance to go, it's a stunningly beautiful country. It's 40 to 45% indigenous, the population there. The people are kind and generous everywhere I went, including in Lima, capital on the coast. But like any place else, it has its elements of, it's like, oh my gosh, the poverty, or, oh, why is the government like that? Or why do they treat people here in this country like that? They have all those issues with distribution of wealth and, socioeconomic stuff. But really, it's a magical country. Those Andes are so incredibly powerful. Machu Picchu, walking the Inca Trail, the times that I've done it, absolutely life-changing. Being in the Sacred Valley, when I've been there on my own or with others, my friend Malku down there was like, brother, why are you traveling like this? Because I've always wanted to have a more local experience. I didn't want to be just staying in 4-star hotels and doing that kind of travel. I wanted to really have an experience with the people there. So I really immersed myself when I've been there on my own or taking friends with me on scouting trips there. So
very cool. Yeah. So Sally's just saying that she's looking to do something like what you're describing, and so she was just looking to get more information about that.
Yeah. Sally, if you reach out to me, I know oh yeah, I do love traveling off the beaten trail. Sally, if you get in touch with me privately, then I can give you some information with people that I know in Peru who are, receiving groups there. And then maybe they can connect you with a group that's coming in from the US or Canada.
She's based out of the UK.
Out of the UK, yeah. I mean, I've had from, Europe as well. So, and specifically the UK. So.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What else feels right for you to share with us at this point?
I think it's good to remember that energy is constantly moving. I mean, nothing ever stands still. Nothing ever stands still. And as I was saying in my Spirit Messages group last week or the week before, that it must have been last week because I just started a new 6-week cycle. Something had come through about, the energy is so fast. 30 years ago, I was hearing, things are moving much faster, but man, even in the last 6 months, from my perspective, things have sped up. And it's just going to speed up more because our consciousness is evolving. Our DNA is evolving. I look at people who are, like my nieces, I swear their DNA is very different than mine. They're adolescents, they're teenagers. It's like the things that they come in with now, the consciousness that they hold is so extraordinary. I'm like, wow. When I watch, the evolution of the transgender community, I believe that the transgender community is here to help open the heart of humanity so we can accept what we might say is different. I do feel like there is so much to be aware of, like on the political scene in the United States and elsewhere, that if we look at the geopolitics, we can learn a lot about our own consciousness. I think I said that at the beginning of our talk. That there's a reason why certain types of leaders show up in mass, it seems, or, they're very loud, they're boisterous, and they want to change things to the detriment of many others. Like in Brazil, we had Bolsonaro, who, was advocating for the destruction of the Brazilian rainforest in a way that was shocking, absolutely shocking, and said, we don't care about these, basically, we don't care about these people who are living in the Amazon, but we can't breathe without trees, right? And in all honesty, what's come to me time and again over the last 30 years is that the earth does not need human beings on it. She does very well on her own. Human beings, she doesn't need us here. We as a species need the planet, to survive in the way we are. We need the trees, we need water, we need these things. So I think the more we learn to love and honor and respect ourselves, the more we will love and honor and respect the planet that we live on, that sustains us. I think this is, to be an earth advocate, I think is a very good thing to be, because nature is our nature. What a teacher. My teacher Lorna would say, okay, Joe, we're going to go and you're going to go sit with this tree. I'll be back in an hour. And I'd be like, what is she talking about? But I used to do that as a kid. I used to go and just sit. I could sit forever on the beach and just listen to the waves, because as a kid, I thought that the waves were talking to me. I thought the water was talking to me. I thought the birds were talking to me. I thought the wind was talking to me. I thought the trees were talking to me. And you know what? It turns out they were. So go be in nature, go spend some time with yourself, some quality time with yourself, get to know yourself, fall in love with yourself over and over and over again. It's a very humbling experience to fall in love with yourself, because the humbling part, I think, comes in, at least for me, because I didn't know that I wasn't in love with myself, even in the moment, as much as I might say, oh yeah, I love myself, but it's like, oh, I was so out of love in that moment. It's very humbling when you get back on the track, the love track. So yeah, we have allies in spirit, in the invisible realm. We have allies in nature. We have our pets that are incredible allies. We have human beings that some we don't even see as our allies, but everyone is our ally. Everyone is our teacher. Every moment is our teacher. So I think that we really should, it would behoove us as a species to pay attention to that. So
that's beautiful. And so if somebody wants to work with Joe, he is generously offering a free session to the participants of this summit. So if you go to the special invitation link in his bio, you will get a description of what he is offering. It is a free session. I'll let him speak about it, but you can connect to him through Facebook. So you find him in Facebook. I've given you the link to his page, his profile, and then you can send him a message through Facebook and you can connect with him.
When you send me a message through Facebook, please let me know that you were here. Otherwise, I'll be like, who is this person just saying hi? Don't just say hi, say hi. I saw your thing on, with Daniel. So identify yourself that way. Otherwise, I'll just go, I don't know this person.
Spam, delete.
Yes, I love deleting. Deleting is my friend.
So Bev is agreeing that the transgender community is here to help us become more compassionate, understanding. I've heard that from Spirit directly in a number of different channels that I listen to.
Yeah.
That is a big part of their agreement, especially to come into this time of our journey of that switch over from the old paradigm to the new paradigm.
Yes.
That's a big part of that shift.
From what you're saying. Yes, I agree. I'm a gay man, and I remember being a teenager saying, God, give this to somebody else. I can't do this. And I then went through a period of sadness that in my later 20s that I would even say that.
Wow.
As if God had made some mistake, like she really screwed up with you. No, it's very, yeah. It was also the acceptance journey.
It's been interesting for me because I'm not a gay man, but I've always been curious. Like at one point, I remember it was like a freshman year in college. I asked myself, how would I know if I was gay? Like, how would I know that? Because what makes me different from someone else? I was like, well, I mean, I can look at a guy and say, yeah, that guy's attractive. I'm not attracted to him, but I can recognize their attractiveness, which most of my friends wouldn't admit to or even recognize. So I was like, well, does that mean that I'm gay? And so I went through a phase where I questioned it. And in the end, I was like, well, I'm physically attracted to women. So I guess I guess I'm not gay.
No, you're not gay.
And I could, okay. and I know, right? I'm sorry that I'm not part of the gay community. But it made me really question this, because I became really fascinated by that question of how does one know? And as I questioned that for like a year and a half, it wasn't like a week that I thought about it. It was for like a year and a half that I was constantly playing different scenarios and questioning and a lot of introspection. Somebody once called me gay curious, and I was like, yeah, that works. So yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, I have actually. I believe that's come out of my mouth at times. Like, well, maybe they're just gay curious.
Yeah. I mean,
it's. I don't think we can pigeonhole sexuality. That's a really that's an interesting experiment to do, to try and pigeonhole someone's sexuality. But that's like trying to pigeonhole your spirituality.
Yeah.
There's no one way.
Yeah.
To spirit. It's all one path, but there's, there are channels that, all converge to spirit. So, yeah.
So Casey's asking a question that's really relevant, not to what we're talking about, but to working with you. How does somebody connect with you if they don't use Facebook? And there's a reason that I'm not giving his email address publicly, which is because there's a lot of robots.
Yeah, you can give that person my email.
So there's a lot of robots out there that will troll through websites looking for emails and adding them to spam lists, which I don't want to support that. So
yeah, and I used to have a website, but it's kind of it's so much has changed for me that I just went,
so what I'll do for people that are listening live is, give me 1 second. It's not letting me get your email address.
Do you want me to say it out loud? No.
No, it's all right. I'm just going to post it into the chat. So you guys can
copy that.
Copy that. Fairly straightforward. And if anybody's listening to this and you want to get in touch with Joe and you do not use Facebook, reach out to me via the contact us link. And I'm happy to point you in that direction.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Thanks, everybody. Yeah.
So
I also want to say, I love doing this work. And I was, for a period, I got very caught up in thinking I had to make an extraordinary financial, it had to be a huge chunk of my income. That very much changed over the last decade or so. Once I left New York and got off the wheel there, I had a thriving practice in New York. And then everything changed in California. And, the last 3 years, there's been a whole reevaluation and, how I want to offer my work and who I want to offer it to and when, etc. I've also been working a full-time job for the last year, which is something I haven't done in, I don't know, a very long time. So that takes my energy in ways that I didn't expect that it would. So I have come to appreciate and love the work in a way that I can't fully articulate. It just it's a humbling experience to be with someone in the way that Spirit shows me to be with someone or a group of people. It's very humbling. So anyway, have a session with me. It's fun, and we both get something out of it.
So beautiful. Great way to kind of bring the conversation to an end. If nobody has any other questions, feel free to ping them as I am wrapping this up. But Joe, thank you for being with us. I appreciate your time. Hopefully,
I
this
loved it.
conversation.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out here.
Hopefully, the conversation was interesting to you guys. I really enjoyed it. And hopefully we will have you join us back again, Joe, at some
that'd be great.
Future season.
Talk in the future.
Absolutely. So for those of you that are with us, coming up next is Margot, and she is going to try and join us live, though she can't speak a lot. But she is going to try and join us if she can to answer questions and interact with us. I am going to play the recording of her session. Which we did a week or two before the start of the season. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing that again, because it was an amazing session. I would really, really recommend it. And so for those of you that are going to join me, I will see you soon. For those of you that cannot, I will see you next time. Until then, I will leave you with being spirit, being human, and simply being from love.
Yeah.
Thank you for being part of this incredible experience. We hope that this session has inspired a new level of understanding within you, allowing you to expand more easily into the essence of your true self and become an even more powerful alchemist in your own life. We invite you to listen to the session again and again in order to go deeper each time and expand even more. Have it be via the replays or the unlimited access package. If you have enjoyed being part of this event, we invite you to tell your friends so that they can join us in the future. We are grateful that you are here, and we thank you for co-creating this experience with us. Until next time, we leave you with being spirit, being human, and simply being from love.